Hey, everybody. I am Cassandra Quinn, and I am on the leadership team with the Conscious Capitalism Chicago chapter. And I'm also a business owner outside of that. So the work that I do with Conscious Capitalism is on this volunteer leadership team. And I do this work because it matters so much to me. And I'm here with somebody else who feels the exact same way and who's been doing it and inspiring people way longer than I have, I think. But I'm excited to be here chatting with Nancy Pautsch, and she is the Chief Evangelist of Stakeholder Value with her company, Envision IT. But I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about who she is. So Nancy, who are you? Tell the world.
Cassandra, thank you for inviting me to join today. This is nice. What a great part of the day to be here with you. So thank you. So yeah, who am I? Well, I'm an envisioner. So one among many curious and compassionate people growing a soulful company. I'm also loving, I guess I'd say a loving and imperfect human, right? Lifelong learner and working to lead a meaningful life, right? And with that, of course, I'm on the conscious leadership journey. So, and as you mentioned, my role at Envision is Chief Evangelist of Stakeholder Value. And so functionally, that's the president of the organization. So, yeah.
I love it. And tell us a little bit more about your company then. So you're in this president or this Chief Evangelist of Stakeholder Value seat. Tell us a little bit more about the organization and what Envision IT does in the world and where you are helping navigate that.
Sure. So, I mentioned we're, a group of curious and compassionate people growing a soulful company. I have the privilege of serving our stakeholders, but we're a thriving conscious business, and our higher purpose is to enrich the lives of our stakeholders. Our business is technology services. And we specialize in Citrix, Microsoft, and cybersecurity. And most often those are delivered as co-managed services. We're also increasingly doing a lot of work in the AI world. So, of course, but really, how we serve our higher purpose is through our skills and our expertise. People rely heavily on technology to help them do their jobs, right? So we make sure it's optimized and secure, so it truly and effectively helps people meaningfully contribute at work every day. Because of course, when employees are productive and engaged, it's a win-win for all stakeholders. But moreover, when people leave work feeling accomplished, like they've really accomplished something, they leave, their better selves, right? So they're their best selves, hopefully, when they leave work, go home to their families, go out into society, pick at a PTA meeting, a sporting event, or whatever, and if we can contribute to them having a great day at work and then being their best selves after work, that's how we think we're helping to, improve the world. And we're starting with the world of work. So that's really where we focus our energies.
I love it. And so much of that resonates with me because that is also such an alignment with who I am and what I do in the world. And I think that that's part of what has brought us together in the world of conscious capitalism and conscious leadership. And I know that that has been really infused in Envision IT from go, right? And tell us a little bit about what conscious capitalism, your history with it, how you got involved, and just kind of give us the lay of the land of that.
Yeah, so if I rewind a little bit, it really did start with Raj Sisodia, who we had the privilege of hosting in Chicago not long ago at the Conscious Capitalism Chicago chapter, which is an awesome, enriching, just inspiring chapter. But it really started with him. I came to his work in a very dark time in my career. Mm-hmm. At the time, myself and another member of our ELT, Bill Crane, our executive leadership team at Envision, we worked together for many years. And together we were working in a company that was absolutely not conscious. It was pretty toxic, emotionally and actually physically. Illness ensued, right? So, it was pretty bad. And instinctively, we knew this isn't how it should be, right? Naturally, both Bill and I felt this was so against our grain and just not something that we wanted to be a part of for the long term. And so it's interesting because we were looking for a way that a way to conduct business, a way that we could lead and conduct business in a way that certainly felt more natural and certainly human and caring. And it was interesting because it was really at that time that Raj's work came to me in the form of the book Firms of Endearment. And I literally, at a very dark time, isn't it funny how the universe works?
Right.
The Firms of Endearment book came in, which really is an inspiring book, a compilation of stories of conscious businesses. And it's so funny because I knew it was out there, but there was evidence. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? This is evidence. This is exactly how it can be, how it should be, what I want business to be, right? And I gave it to Bill, and he said the same thing. We're like, oh my gosh. And, we were searching for how could we do this? Certainly not in that current company. And at that time, just frankly, and I think, again, how the universe works, right? We were doing a favor for one of our team at a former company and doing a favor for him. And Bo, the founder of Envision, was doing a favor for one of his business acquaintances. And we ended up meeting, again, as favors to other people, and leaned into each other a little bit. Certainly Bill and I learning a little bit more about Envision, and Bo learning a little bit more about us, and realizing we were really valued and both wanting to foster conscious business. So gave Bo the book, Firms of Endearment, said, that's what we want to do. And he said, that's what I want Envision to be. So the three of us joined forces to become the executive leadership team of Envision IT. And we just had our 10th anniversary together. It's been oh my gosh, an enriching ride together. I'll tell you, it's such a highlight of this lifetime for me. It's just been great. Yeah.
I love it. I love that when, like you said, sometimes we are in those darkest places, like the universe just aligns in a way, and now lining up into your purpose of what you're doing now. And I think that just to slow down just a touch for those who may not be as familiar with conscious capitalism as a movement, a philosophy, an organization, I think just kind of tuning in, who is Raj in the world of conscious capitalism? So, and why is he such an important part of this journey?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, his book, Firms of Endearment, I think came out, 15 years ago, rough and tough, 10 to 15 years ago. And it really, like I mentioned, is a compilation of stories of conscious businesses. And because at that time, back in the 2008, 2010, you heard so much about business and really the dark underbelly, the shadow side of business, right? Yeah. And he actually found, I call them diamonds in the rough. And so that book, one of the companies that he and his co-authors profiled in that book was Whole Foods. And during that time, he and John Mackey, the co-founder of Whole Foods and the CEO at the time of Whole Foods, became friendly. And what they did is they drew some similarities, or they found the common threads among many of the companies in the book. And with that, they founded the movement Conscious Capitalism, and based off the principles that, again, were these commonalities of what makes a conscious business. Yeah. And with it, they founded the movement. And the movement is really just a group of valued business leaders that are dedicated to elevating humanity through business. And that's us all day long. That's why we're in business. And so they've created this community and a movement where we really learn together, share together, again, of valued leaders is what I say, where we can have this, it's so funny when people find conscious business leaders, and we can talk a little bit about that. When conscious business leaders get involved in conscious capitalism, I often hear them say, oh my gosh, I found my tribe. And it's just so true. That's true for us too. But anyway, Raj was the one. I actually was at an event with him, and he's the one who first told me about conscious capitalism back in 2015, 16, I want to say. And he said, Nancy, you really need to get involved. So of course, okay, Raj says that, so I'll go check it out, right? Yeah. And I did. And real quickly, I mentioned conscious capitalism as a movement. There's certainly a book, Conscious Capitalism. There's chapters. There's a global organization called CCI, Conscious Capitalism, as well, a nonprofit, as well as chapters throughout the world,
Yeah.
including the stellar flagship chapter in Chicago. But let's go back to conscious capitalism, really, and kind of the tenets, the 4 tenets, because oftentimes people will say, well, what's a conscious business?
Mhm.
And again, Raj and John really articulate this quite well in the book Conscious Capitalism. And there's 4 primary tenets. The first is having a higher purpose, right? Really your why. What's your why of business? Why are you in business? What's the higher purpose? What are you serving? Beyond just making money, right?
Yeah.
So a marriage of purpose and profit, right? Because this is for profit too, for profit businesses. So your higher purpose, to a stakeholder orientation. And we consider our stakeholders, certainly envisioners, our clients, our business partners that we pay for services, right? And our community. So having a stakeholder orientation rather than just a shareholder orientation, which I think many folks consider, that's what business does. And then third, conscious leadership. And we can talk at length about that, but that's, there's so much to conscious leadership. But conscious leadership, so authenticity, self-awareness, emotional intelligence. There's so much to the conscious leadership journey, and trust me, because I've been on it for many years. And by the way, there's no check mark, there's no finish line, right? It's a constant evolution and constant work that can be fun work. But anyway, conscious leadership, and that's really important as to foster the 4th tenet, which is a conscious culture. And certainly a conscious culture at a bare minimum is psychologically safe, but also a culture of belonging, a culture of care. Because for business by itself, I mean, a conscious culture's spur innovation. It's really hard to have an innovative company or innovate in business without a conscious culture, right? Without that culture of belonging, care, and psychological safety, and much more to that, right? But those are the 4 tenets: higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. So does that answer the question, kind of what is conscious capitalism?
No, I love it. Yeah. You kind of tackled 2 areas that I wanted to cover really nicely and integrated. So helping those who may not be as familiar to understand that Raj Sisodia is the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism, and it really in a lot of ways is the heartbeat of our entire movement and organization. And also it, through his work with John Mackey, helped frame those tenets, right? And the guiding principles of those tenets for how we all do business differently, right? And recognizing that I'm so glad you got into the stakeholder versus shareholder, especially since that is a part of your title, and helping just widen that understanding that we as business leaders have a privilege and a responsibility to all of those that our businesses touch, and what profound positive impact that can have. I think that there's so much about like traditional capitalism that people can see the destructive harm that can cause, and saying, how are we moving away from only being focused on the bottom line, only focused on shareholders, and how can we really be agents of change in our community and our culture in ways that no other entity can, right? I think that that's what's really special about conscious capitalism, is like it is working in tandem with, government agency, charity, nonprofit, but understanding that there is a separate sector that only private business or public business can really fill. And when we're doing it consciously, it can be uplifting and rejuvenating for our communities.
Absolutely. I think sometimes capitalism gets a bad rap, and fairly so in how it's depicted in the media, and of course some bad behavior, right? When profit maximization is the sole focus at the expense of everything else, it's not great. That's not even good. That's terrible, in fact. And I think capitalism at its core is, the founding fathers, the whole, Adam Smith, you can go into the history. I mean, it's based in freedom, right? So that's not necessarily the The problem is when it's misused or the power of it is misused, right? It can be a force for good. And I think at least many of the people that I have the privilege of knowing and communing with in the conscious capitalism movement and beyond, right? That are really leveraging a business as a force for good,
Yeah.
embracing that stakeholder approach, that stakeholder orientation. We're exemplifying that it can be good and it should be good. And yeah, and your point about stakeholder being in my title, well, that's our higher purpose, is enriching the lives of our stakeholders, right? So that it's funny because the first tenet and the second tenet for us are really married.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, and I think that like as we kind of lean into that a little, then can you give us some specific examples about how conscious capitalism affects your leadership and affects your team, and like what are some tangible ways that that shows up for Envision IT?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, everyone in Envision, knows our higher purpose, right? And I think that's really important. But moreover, hopefully, folks that join our really special family are inspired by that purpose, right? Because and also our other stakeholders, our clients, our business partners, our community. It's interesting because when clients, business partners work with us, like, oh, that's different. Like the experience is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, when I mention our purpose and envisioners knowing our purpose, it's also important that they recognize how their daily work contributes to that purpose, right? So they're tying it together.
Yeah.
And so that's one way. We certainly stakeholders in everything we do, right? All of our titles, all of our roles, people understand how they're enriching the lives of our stakeholders, right? As I mentioned. And then conscious leadership, many at Envision, our titles are all kind of like mine, right? And we have a fun process of coming up with them, by the way. It's typically a creative group with the person who the title is going to be for, of course, first, right?
Yeah.
And then one or two, probably two other people, and we really look at what is the role, who is the person, and then come up with that. So together in kind of a really fun way. But anyway, conscious leadership. We have, so we don't have titles of managers or supervisors because I think as an adult, no one really wants to be managed or supervised. At least we don't feel the need to do that. And so we have, everyone can be a leader, right? So many folks are on the conscious leadership journey, right? Which we learn so much about, and everything we as the ELT and other leaders in the company learn on that journey, we share out. Right. So we just simply create an invitation for envisioners. No one's required. There's no judgment if people participate or not, by the way. Absolutely none. No brownie points and no demerits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just what's really interesting, though, is when we pick it workshops or speakers or different enrichments or coaches or anything we meet through the conscious capitalism movement, we bring it in-house. It's so interesting because folks that do participate, it's like they drink the cool, they're inspired, they're happy. It's, it's just kind of fun. And that's how people end up getting more involved as they see the results of folks either working collaboratively, inspiringly, but that's just kind of in our culture anyway. So all of those things really then support the conscious culture, right? I mean, it's voluntarily, of course, participation, but it just feeds off each other, right? When people during the pandemic, when these brilliant technologists who, are asking each other over video conferencing, how are you doing today? How can I support you today? How can I support you in this conversation? Right? I mean, there's just this care that reverberates throughout the culture, and then out, even then again to all of our stakeholders.
I think that what I really love about the conscious movement is the breaking down of artificial needs for barriers and silos in our life, and that that there really is this integration, but in a way that people have authentic control over that. It's not that your business or your work is bleeding so much into your personal life that there's no like, you don't feel good and healthy about it. It is like, I have that right control of the harmony. And I'm the conductor, I guess, of that harmony in my own life, and the same thing for my team, right? And recognizing that when we can break down some of those false, unneeded barriers, and we can show up like people first. How are you? How can I support you? And recognizing that it's not like we have to have this sterile business only professional, like it's not real, it's not helpful anyway, right?
It's yeah. And thank you for using that word harmony. I love that word. That I use that all the time because I think balance sometimes implies perfection, and it's never perfection. I always say is pure fiction. But what we try to do is really support, for Envisioners anyway, a whole life, right? Because people, we ask them to bring their whole selves to work, everything, right? I mentioned I am an absolutely imperfect human, right? But loving. And so, we learn from each other, right? And if people, can bring their whole selves to work, you know what? They might get some support in some areas that they may not if they don't bring that.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And an example, it's funny you mentioned that because one of my best days recently, again, I have the privilege of serving our stakeholders, right? And I don't take that lightly, though I don't take myself too seriously. But I asked to get together with, which often, the ELT will do at different times with folks that have recently joined Envision. And this was someone who was part-time for many months and is working, becoming full-time per her choice. And I met with her, I think 6 months, 8 months in, and just asked her how we were doing for her. Did she feel supported? How's she doing? Right. And it was really interesting. And it was just a quick chat. And she said she, being an Envisioner and learning what she's learning in Envision, has made her a better partner, a better mother, and a better friend. And she said she's happier, right? That was it for me. Because that's our purpose, right? Enriching the lives of our stakeholders. She said she brings those things home, and it's just, kind of reflected there and rippled out. And that was a really good day, Cassandra, for me. Anyway,
yeah, 100%.
Those little stories, they might seem little to other people, but for me, they're impactful.
Yeah, no, I don't think that is little at all. I think that I had a similar moment very recently where a member of my team sort of had the opposite experience, where she had been working a certain number of hours and needed to scale that back because of the rest of her life. And she was really, anxious to have that conversation with me. And when she sat down, brought that up, I was like, okay, that's great. Let's figure out what it is that you can do, what you are able to continue doing, and then what you can't, and we'll find the right people to support in those ways. And she was so relieved. And the beautiful part of that story, though, was not even that moment. It was that when she was tucking her kids in at night with her husband, they have this practice of asking what was the best part of your day. And she decided to share with them that moment because she realized it was the first time that she's ever felt completely safe in a job. And that she wanted to demonstrate to her children how people should treat them when they go to work for somebody. So she thanked me she was like, I had this really beautiful moment with my kids, and that just caused me to be a weepy mess, to be like, oh my gosh. But the ripple effect on the generations that I was able to see in that moment of saying, yeah, when you truly take care of your people, like, it has such positive impact and ripple, like, immediately.
Well, and a couple of things you mentioned there that I think are really important to highlight, because I think sometimes folks who aren't in the movement but just hear about it, peripherally,
Yeah.
and I think, oh, rainbows, daffodils, and unicorns, right? And it's not. I mean, it's hard work. And when we talk about boundaries, they're healthy boundaries too, right? Asking for what you need, but creating an environment where people can ask for what they need. And then the recognition that we can't always provide that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we can't. I had to learn a tough lesson between selfless leadership and servant leadership. Servant leadership is not selfless leadership. And, we as leaders can also not get burned out. But I want to just commend you, Cassandra, on something really important, because what you mentioned in that discussion with the employee you mentioned, or you referenced, is you also talked about the business. Hey, what do you need? Thank you for coming. Well, a couple of things. First, you fostered the environment where she felt comfortable coming to you, right? That's already an invitation. That's already a win, right? That person felt they could come to you and not just suffer in silence, right? One.
Yeah.
Two, you talked about the business. Let's talk about your responsibilities, because the work doesn't go away, right? When someone, takes time for self-care or whatever is needed, the work doesn't go away. The business still is a stakeholder, and the business still needs to thrive. So what can we do to accommodate the business? And what your work is, where we either hand it off, whatever we do. But those are important points of what you just said, and then come to win-win. The other thing with conscious business is the idea of a win-win. It's not a zero-sum game. That's where we look at the stakeholder perspective. And as much as we can get the win-win-win-win, right? Or the win-win, where it's not having a negative effect on the other stakeholders, ideally a win-win-win for, right? But certainly not harming anyone, even though it may not be, serving them or highlighting them in a win, but the win-win versus the zero-sum game. I think, in the traditional view, thanks, to, again, media, Hollywood, sometimes the portrayals of tough business, look at the Wolf of Wall Street originally, right? The Big Short, highlighting some bad behavior in business, right? But shining a spotlight on that. Conscious capitalism shines a spotlight on those that aren't behaving that way, right? But going back to kind of that negative view of business, that show always highlighted the zero-sum game. Someone has to lose in order for someone else to win. And that's not our experience. That's not our experience. And so the more that folks can recognize a different way or continue to learn if they're on this path. And that's what the movement has done, with us. I look at attending conscious capitalism events in Chicago, right? Globally at the CEO Summit is coming up. The CCI CEO Summit in Austin is coming up very shortly. It happens every year in October. But with the offering of programming, the offering of community, I look at that for us as kind of, a workout, right? Our daily workout, our weekly workout, our monthly workout, it's really keeping us in shape. Because I mentioned earlier, conscious leadership, fostering a conscious business, cultivating a conscious business does not have a check mark, a finish line, or anything like that. You're constantly learning and sharing, right? And seeing all of us we raise the water level, all ships, right? Raise in a rising tide.
Yeah.
And so it's so inspiring, right? It helps me remember, why I get up every day and have the privilege of doing this, right? And then, like I said, learning. I mean, we've brought in so many coaches, so many different modalities that we've learned from this awesome community that have benefited not only just Envisioners, but beyond. And I'll tell you, the results are undeniable, Cassandra. And I know you're getting these results too. But, first we have fun, right? And we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I'm the 81 on that front. But, we work the tenants. But we've learned through all of that in the last 10 years, we've learned a couple key lessons. And these are broad strokes, but man, they're important. And that is, we've learned that cared for people care for people, right? And what that has fosters, because again, let's get away from the rainbows, daffodils, and unicorns fallacy, right? It's all that. Listen, there are some fun things, let's be clear. And there are some sprinkles of that, right? There's business of, there's true business. You have to have a differentiated business strategy, a go to market, and then execute on it, right? I mean, there's business principles too. But when I say cared for people, here's what helps foster our growth. We surveyed Envisioners, we survey them every year. And in 2023, we learned 100% of Envisioners ranked 100% in some key categories. Engagement, 100% are engaged. Trust. Envisioners trust the leadership in the organization, 100%, right? 100% of Envisioners see their work as meaningful work. They know how they're impacting a better world and enriching the lives of our stakeholders, right? They know how they're doing it. And here's the big one. We asked if you feel your life is enriched, having, being an Envisioner, 100%, which tells us, that gauges us, we're delivering on our purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Our higher purpose, we're actually delivering on it. Those for us help us see cared for people, because that's why when we get to the business results, again, the business is a key stakeholder, right? But we find an engaged workforce that finds their work meaningful, are in a trusted environment and a conscious culture, work better. They're in flow, right? They care, they're in flow, and they're doing, they're just, again, at the end of the day, feeling accomplished, right? Which is what we try to do with our clients. But with the other key lesson beyond the caring is, and you're learning this, so many people in the community are experiencing this, and that is business for good is good business.
Yep.
Envision has been around for 22 years, right? We've been consciously operating as a conscious business for the last 10, meaning really applying all the tenets, right, in a structured format, and with much mindfulness and planning. But good business for good is good business. Last year, again, around for 22 years, last year, 22 to 23, we grew the business by 76%. And that's healthy business, right? Organically. We grew that organically. And it's healthy business, not just top line, but throughout the business. The other thing is, and this speaks to Envisioners, client satisfaction, year over year hovers at 98% awesome. So clients can say, did we do bad, good, or awesome?
Yeah.
And in the first half of this year, we were at 100%, but we go annually. And someone gave us a couple, goods. We got some goods in there. And so we're at 98% awesome again this year, which I'll take, because I'm in perfection, right? I don't know, but I'll take that. So and so much of that credit, that's absolutely not chest pounding, except for conscious capitalism and the conscious business tense. All of the things we're learning in that community have helped us thrive, and moreover, our stakeholders thrive, which is our goal. So that's from this beautiful community. And like I said, Raj being such an inspiration of that, co-founder of that, and him being the early inspirations to setting us on this path. We're so grateful.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that kind of takes me into the last couple of things I wanted to touch on before we wrapped up. So the first is I just being able to hear all of the ways that Envision IT has been able to embody and live out these tenets and be this example in the world is so beautiful. And so I think that it just made it such a natural fit that Envision IT recently sponsored Raj coming to Chicago along with Dr. Neha Sangwan for their Energize and Awaken tour. Tell me a little bit about that choice and that, because I think that you helped spearhead that decision or help lead into the company sponsoring that event for Conscious Capitalism Chicago chapter.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer for us. I mean, the ELT, sure, I raised it, of course, because his work has been such an inspiration for us, right? And so, of course, and so many Envisioners, we're headquartered in Madison, but we're big participants in the Chicago chapter because it's the closest to us. Yeah. And so many Envisioners came down for that, obviously. And so why? Because his work was such an early inspiration. And then, of course, we've followed his work throughout with so many of his co-authored books, right? Everybody Matters with Bob Chapman, outstanding. And then we did workshops with Raj and Bob, and Bob's organization, Truly Human Leadership, right? It's great. But then the healing organization, Shakti Leadership with Neelima Bhatt. Raja Neelima also came to Chicago years ago, right? What's interesting about this one is this is the first that I know of book that's solely focused on Raj and his journey. He hasn't written really about himself.
Mm-hmm.
And almost all his work before have been co-authored and really focused on others, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was his inward journey, which I think was very courageous of him, because going inward is it's it's really not easy, especially finding those those dark places and understanding them. But only when we do this, and Raj talks about this, do we really become authentic and mindful leaders. And we don't want to be mindlessly controlled by pick at a default setting we don't know about.
Yeah.
Right? That's putting someone else in charge. And a conscious leader really works not to do that. Yeah. Right? And really be mindfully in charge and know ourselves, know our default settings, know what we need to shine a light on those so they're not running us, right? And then inflict it on other people, right? So this book was such a departure for him. And we certainly wanted to support him in that, as well as the messaging that he evokes in that. But then also, let's not forget, and you mentioned this, Neha Sangwan. Oh my gosh, what a powerhouse, right?
Right.
We've also studied her work. Talk RX, her first book, and now this one, Powered by Me. Just such important, great stuff. And so applicable in our industry, the technology industry, which is a sharp-elbowed, tough industry, and burnout. We just read another thing. So 77% of IT staff, in-house IT staff, are highly stressed or actively burning out, right? Mm-hmm. We just came through my inbox 2 weeks ago that CompTIA, doesn't matter, industry, in our industry, kind of a figure, research organization, said that it's now just accepted in IT, just accept the fact that people will burn out. So, which we don't. I mean, we absolutely don't do that. And we're working to not have that happen. That's such a big part of our work every day with our clients, is not have their folks burn out. Right. But anyway, Neha's work on that, I pray anyone who watches this will go to her work too, because she really gives important, how to not burn out, what to do for self-care and communication, by the way. We talked about healthy boundaries, right? That we wouldn't not sponsor that. Raja and Neha coming to Chicago.
I love it. I love it. Last thought, who are the kinds of people who are ideal to work with Envision IT? Who should come to you for support? Who are your ideal folks?
Yeah, well, clients, we're business to business, right? IT, folks that are people that I think, companies that most benefit from our work, again, specializing in Citrix, Microsoft cybersecurity, and much of that delivered, like I said, as a co-managed service. Services are folks that are really trying to get their IT teams out of what's pretty natural in IT these days, which are unachievable positions, right? Mm-hmm. Like trying to do everything, wear every kind of hat, be an expert at everything, right? And look for a partner that truly partners with their folks and not just outsources and tells you to replace them. That's not our jam. Our jam is partnering and really freeing up those folks to focus on things that are more important to the business, closer to the work, business impacting projects. Because guess what? Then they're going to feel more accomplished, see more of the results of their efforts, right? So I guess companies that are partner friendly, right? That care about their people, really care about their people, and are trying to foster engagement and free them to actually have a bigger impact, that also leverage technology to help drive the business and then help their people do that effectively. I guess that would be people. So businesses that are interested in that.
I love it. Well, thank you for spending so much time with me this morning. This was delightful to dig into this with you, learn more about Envision IT, be able to spotlight you as a conscious leader within the conscious capitalism movement. I know sometimes people can feel a little uncomfortable being in the spotlight, but I think that just what is so valuable about that is we can't be what we can't see. And that's why having these kinds of conversations are so important. And so sometimes we have to work through that discomfort of being seen, because if we want to have that kind of impact, I think that sometimes being able to be that example and lead by example. And like you said, we're all imperfect. We're learning as we go. We are growing. We are dedicated to our own growth and development. And through that, we can help bring others along the journey with us. So thank you so
Cassandra,
much.
thank you for such trusting hands. You took good care. This is not my comfort zone, and you have been such a great nurturing leader in this conversation. So thank you for that. Hey, Cassandra, real quickly, your organization, can you just tell everybody where to find you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the founder of Quinn Business Consulting. I offer fractional COO and growth advisory services. So I come alongside businesses who may be in a growth or development stage and help them move through that. So it's very easy to find me. My website is just my name, CassandraQuinn.com. And so people can reach out to me that way. And what about you, Nancy? What's the best way for people to find you all if they're wanting to get in touch with Envision IT?
Sure. There are a few companies named Envision IT out there. So we're envisionitllc.com. And then on LinkedIn, of course, Envision IT LLC. And I bet through this, if people see it on LinkedIn, they'll be able to find us both. So,
absolutely.
Cassandra, much thanks. Much gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.